Through the course of 100 years, a prayer group turned into something greater than they might have imagined could ever have happened. The journey hasn't been easy, but through the dedication of leaders in the congregation, a church has outgrown multiple facilities and moved to different communities. This is a changed church.
This church began as a prayer group in the Sharnick apartment in 1907, and there was a hunger to understand God in a more personal way, as had been influenced by a variety of revivals that were taking place around the world at that time. Two people came to Milwaukee to begin to preach in open-air meetings or in a tent or a public situation, and that would have been H.A. Ulrich and a Mr. Poplar. And the preaching would have taken place in both English and German, and so that immigrants who are still speaking in German would be reached through the ministry of Mr. Ulrich, and then those that spoke in English would be influenced through the ministry of Mr. Poplar. In moving out of the tent locale, the congregation that had formed around German-speaking services rented facility until they were able to purchase their first building and then eventually build their first building. So there were a number of locations in the early years for the Deutsche Mission and then Bethel Tabernacle.
In 1924, the congregation purchased a plot of land on 18th and Brown Street. Construction began in 1925, and on February 28, 1926, the new church building was dedicated to the Lord. This served the congregation for over 38 years.
My parents carried me into church. It was 6 weeks after I was born. And we went to, at that time it was called Bethel Tabernacle. The first pastor was Pastor Ulrich, and that was when the church was strictly German speaking. And then as the congregation became younger and the families had children, those children were going to school and to public school, and they spoke English. And so it became necessary to have a German service and an English service. And so then they hired Pastor Sharnick, and Pastor Sharnick was the English pastor, and Pastor Ulrich was the German pastor. And generally what happened was the German service was in the mornings on Sunday, and the evening service was English.
From earliest on, many of the members had ability to play instruments, and so a very large orchestra was put together.
As the years went by, some of us became affiliated with an instrument, and before we knew it, we had about 12 people that played various instruments, and we would play along with the service and keep the people in time rather than having one person being a little more aggressive in their singing, and so it was a very enjoyable time.
The singing of special songs became very much a part of the development of the church from early on. So the fine arts and music and instrumentation were part of the vitality of the congregation.
Being a German church, people were very minded of using music in the church. And so we always had choirs, but I was fortunate enough, I was asked to be the director when I was 18 years old. And it started, and we had a very well mixed choir. We had adults, senior adults that sang, and they sang with, we had teenagers at 18 years of age also. And so we had a very good mix of people. And as the church grew and the pastors became various pastors, we had the next pastor was Pastor Elmer Kirschman. He was the one that was in charge of stimulating the people to realize that we needed to go into a bigger facility. And so then he was the spearhead for us to move to 70th and Maple Terrace.
I believe they began construction in '63 in Tulsa and moved into the building in '64. And Reverend Kirschman would have been the pastor at that time.
We were getting ready to consider building another church or a different location, and participated with the architectural committee. And after they found a piece of land, there was a group that participated in land location. And then once the location was found, and we looked for a architect and a builder, and to see what we could put on the piece of property that we had purchased on 70th and Maple Terrace. As we developed that church and we had it designed, it was a beautiful tabernacle, as most people will attest to. Had a program for the youth with busing. Created some controversy in the neighborhood, but we tried to work with it, and we had, for a time, we had 4 buses running. We started out with 1 bus, and that was when we were still at Wauwatosa. And then as the people went out and solicited children in the neighborhood, it became more and more popular. And we had 2 buses, and then 3 buses, and then a 4th bus. The men volunteered to service the buses and keep them running. And we had 4 separate areas that the buses went to, and they would pick the children up in the morning. Sunday school started at 9:30, and so they would pick the kids up somewhere anytime between 8:45 and 9 o'clock, and have them at church on time. And we had qualified teachers for the 4 different divisions of ages that we had. And we would bring them all together for a general opening service, and then they would divide into the various programs. We outgrew it because we were getting more and more people, but the biggest problem we had was parking. Our people had to walk, especially in the wintertime, for at least 2 blocks. And our people were getting older. We had set aside some parking areas for either handicapped or senior citizens. But again, we were landlocked. There was just no way we could get around. Wanting to buy additional properties, the city was frowning at that. The one problem we had was parking. And we approached the city and wanted to know if we could put in a parking structure.
We had a number of attempts to expand the building in Tulsa, which were met with opposition from the neighbors and City Hall. They believed that we didn't have enough property to expand at the Maple Terrace and 70th Street location.
No way we could get around wanting to buy additional properties. The city was frowning at that. They just dug their heels in and would not consider us expanding any further.
We had selected a realtor and told the realtor what we wanted and where we wanted to go. And he told us that he knew the property that he thought would fit our congregation, that the property 177th in Cleveland he had hunted on as a kid, that he would approach the family that owned it on our behalf and see if they would be willing to sell it.
By chance, the people that owned the property where Poplar Creek is now, it was a farm, and they did not want it to see it develop into a commercial property. They wanted it to do something that would be good for the community.
Well, that family had purchased the property in 1952, and the parents had always told their children that they believed a church should come to this property someday. Well, the someday arrived when Mom and Dad had passed away and the children had inherited the property, and they were deciding what they're going to do at the same timetable. We knew that the city of New Berlin had a policy on their books of no new churches. They had 16 churches in a community of 33,000 people, and they were dead set on no new churches coming into New Berlin. So when we approached the Common Council, we had neighborhood backing, and surprisingly, the Common Council that had this restriction on their books changed their mind, and in their meeting with us for our request to move here, with us disclosing the master plan of what we wanted to do, the neighbors and the politicians said, I guess it could be worse. We could have somebody who wants to do something that is entirely institutional and doesn't resemble a church, and we might not like it at all. We could actually like what you're planning to do. They voted, and they voted unanimously to allow us to use the property for church use. In putting together our plan for the future, purchase of property was one of the pieces, relocating was another. We thought it would take us a number of years to pay off the property, but it only took us 1.5 years. And with it paid off so quickly, that jump-started our faith even more so than to say, okay, this timeline of events is before us. How do we continue to proceed? We
put the building up for sale on Maple Terrace. It was agreed that the Meadowbrook people would purchase our facility if we were willing to leave right away. And so through the efforts of our then pastors, youth pastor especially, they found the ability to rent the building at State Fair.
Dave had mentioned to me maybe we should sort of look up at State Fair Park. So I immediately thought that was a great location and headed up to State Fair Park. Unannounced, just showed up one day and met a lady there by the name of Sherry Gevitter, who ran the State Fair Park building. And after we decided to look at the facilities and rent some space there, Sherry had come to me and said, hey, we have some space in the basement. If you consider doing some work to it, we possibly could work out a partnership where you could keep the facility on during the week as yours. Excuse me, during the week as yours. And then we could work out a partnership where we could take part of the space back during State Fair and use it as part of our youth center for our students to work out of during the week. And so we ended up kind of just having favor with State Fair Park and started working out a partnership on what we could do. We rented space during the Wednesday nights for our religious portion of the facility so that we didn't have issues with separation of church and state. And so ended up getting 6,000 square feet of space. Our church did fundraisers and raised cash through offerings to remodel space, put in gaming centers. A cafe was down there. We put indoor basketball courts, which one of them turned into an indoor skate park after a while. We also were able to run skateboarding ministry out of there, and just basically ended up moving in there. And it was kind of ironic how the Lord worked it out. We ended up renting the space on Wednesday nights for our church service, and then during the week we ran our every day after school. We were open from 3 till about 10:30 roughly, and our issues were we were going to have some huge problems trying to get our youth center passed and getting this thing open.
State Fair Park Board eventually had to vote on our youth moving in there, and there was a change of governor from one regime to another, and the previous regime was more open towards churches using government facility, and the new regime was not as open. And so there was a vocal state senator who was newly placed on the State Fair Park Board, and he was not open to a church group using the facility.
So we went to our board meeting to do the final approvals, and when we got there, there were a couple people that were venomously opposed to it. I'll say there was one person specifically that was venomously opposed to the project, did not want the church at all to be on the property, and we knew it. And so Sherry came out about just before we were up and said, "Hey, Ted, this doesn't look good today. We're going to have a really tough time getting this passed, and I just want to forewarn you." And I said, we've come a long way, and I really believe God's in this. And I obviously have a lot more faith now than I did at that moment, but seeing hindsight, I was pretty into this and knew that God wanted us there. And so I called the church and said, "Look, we have a huge problem. There's a couple people that are opposing it, one person specifically who is venomously opposed to this project, doesn't want it to be on site, and is going to give us a hard time." Long story short, the meeting came. We had the church people all praying, and at the moment they went to call for our vote for our particular position at the youth center and allowing us to be a part of that youth center in the non-religious capacity, the person who was opposed to us got a phone call right in the middle of the board meeting, and the gentleman reached down, grabbed his phone, and I remember this like it was yesterday. He grabbed his phone, voicemailed it, and put it down in his pocket, and he got up and walked out of the room and never returned to the board meeting. And so they went ahead and did the vote. They called it, it was unanimous all the way across the table that Poplar Creek Church, then Bethel Assembly of God, would be able to meet in that facility and to redecorate and redo and remodel that 6,000 square feet in the lower space. And from that moment on, it was history. God had really opened up that way, whether it was through a phone call or a distraction or whatever it was. The person who did not want us there got called out right before the vote, and I really felt like that was the Lord. And so they ended up doing the vote, and everything was amazing.
And then when our building sold much faster than we thought it would, we then applied for the church to be able to move to State Fair Park because the relationship was so excellent. They were willing for the church to also move there and have an interim location. We moved to the new facility in March of 2005. Construction had begun during the summer of 2004, and it took almost a year to build the new building. During that period of time, we were at State Fair Park and setting up and setting down on Sunday morning and Wednesday night for the services. Our office was located in Brookfield, our services were in West Dallas, and our construction was in New Berlin. So we were becoming located across a number of communities, which became an interesting part of learning the difference of communities. So then we moved in New Berlin. It seemed like we gathered people on the way. The church changed its name just before moving to New Berlin because we had the name Bethel in Tosa, and also in New Berlin was Bethel Hill Methodist Church. And being about a block apart, we started to receive each other's mail. So our congregation felt that wasn't fair to the Bethel Methodist congregation to have the confusion on identity. And so we proposed that we change our name. The congregation was willing. We asked the congregation to submit possible names to choose from. And among the names submitted was Poplar Creek Church, based on Poplar Creek running through the property.
In the preliminary thoughts that we had, we felt that we wanted to provide a facility that would be for those people who were 45 and younger. That was the agreement that the board had set up. As wise as they were, the architects for the first phases for the educational section designed it around the colors for Winnie the Pooh. And everybody chuckled, kind of, but it worked out very well. And when the children came and they saw that, they recognized the colors and the places, and the teachers were adequate. And so we knew that we couldn't put up a sanctuary right away. It was impossible, so we had to put up a facility that was able to be tasked. And so we did a combination with the large gym, where we did half of it that would be adequate for worship with a stage, and the other half was for activities, sport activities. And we put in a nice kitchen, and we We put in a sound system that we could afford at the time, and we put in the amount of restrooms and things that we felt could adequately maintain the people when we were there, and with the numbers that the city would let us have in the room. So we designed the room at 550 capacity, and as we know today, we're getting pretty close to that.
When we moved in 2005, we had 2 Sunday morning services. We were meeting in the gym area, which is a high school-sized gym with stage, and we had a divider in that room so that the congregation met in half of the gym area. We were a congregation at that time of about 300 people with 2 morning services. We had the home fellowship groups at night and Wednesday night services, and soon discovered that we were not able to fit in the 2 services, started 3 Sunday morning services, and then expanded to a young adult service on Sunday night at 5:30 p.m.
We have a vision for our college-age ministry people who, a lot of them fall away from the Lord. They go away to school. A lot of them come here and still don't have a great place to go. They come to Milwaukee, or they come to a school here in town and don't really have a church base to call home. And they're used to something a little younger and more, I guess, on their speed or level. And so the board here decided to go ahead and open something up like that. So we opened a Sunday night service. So it was strategic in our planning. It wasn't that that was the only spot open. We just felt that a lot of college people need to sleep in. They're working late. They work retail jobs and night jobs. And so we felt it was best to have a Sunday evening so they could be done working Saturday night, sleep through the night, and then get up in the morning, not be pressured to come to church at 7 in the morning or 8. And so we felt that the time fit them really well. And so we opened up a 18 to 40 college ministry.
More recently, we've gone to 5 Sunday morning services. We have a variety of venues. We have 2 traditional services, 2 contemporary services, and 1 young adult service, and that makes up our 5 services. So we're multi-venue with differences of times, trying to make opportunities for people to meet with us when their work schedules or their home schedules, in this culture, in their athletic schedules, would fit for meeting times for the congregation to come together and worship.
We're trying to meet the needs for the entire congregation. And as of right now, it appears to be working very well.
And then presented to the congregation to expand to the 2nd phase. They immediately voted upon paying off the 1st phase to start the 2nd phase, and that took about a year to construct. And so we've now been in the 2nd phase for approximately a year's period of time. Already all of those rooms are being utilized not only on Sunday and Wednesday, but in midweek functions as well. And so we are in a goal to present to the congregation a plan to pay that off. And once it is paid off, go to phase 3, which will be the sanctuary. And all of that, of course, is based upon not only using the space, but continuing to outreach to the community around us and seeing other people become a part of the church family at Poplar Creek.
We are fulfilling a need, and that's what we're here for. We're here for people to find the Lord and to enjoy serving Him.